Now, as a little extra note here, I also want to mention that in the past, when working with older versions of NGRX, the create effect function here did not exist, and instead of registering an effect like this, you would have just registered this pipeline as a value here in a property, and you would have decorated it with the add effect decorator. And this decorator would have been imported from NGRX effect, but it's not supported in recent NGRX versions anymore. In old versions it was supported, and you would have passed dispatch false wrapped in an object as a value to this add effect decorator. So this is how you would have written this in older versions, older NGRX versions. In more recent versions, as mentioned, the effect decorator is not supported anymore, and therefore instead you wrap this pipeline into a function and pass that function to the create effect function, and you then simply pass this configuration object as a second value to create effect. So that's just something you should also be aware of. But with that, this effect is now registered, and now to register it with NGRX, you should go to your main.ts file when using standalone components, or the app module file when using modules, and then there you have this provide effects function or effects module for root. And you would now simply pass an array to provide effects or to effects module for root, and pass your effect classes that you have to this array. So in this case, the counter effects class. It is imported here and then passed as a value in this array to provide effects. And again, that's exactly the same if you're using modules. So therefore, here I'll also copy the counter effects file from my standalone component app into the store folder of the module-based app. And then here I add counter effects to effects module for root, and also add this import here, of course. Now with that, there's just one additional thing you should do in both applications. This counter effects class should be decorated with the add injectable decorator provided by Angular to make sure that it can successfully be injected. So you should add this here to counter effects in the module-based application, and also when using standalone components. And of course, you must make sure that you also add the import from Angular core. With that, however, you're able to serve this application no matter if you're using standalone components or modules. And you can therefore then see your counters and decrement and increment them. And you will see that now if you open your console, the action object gets logged there, because in my effect I added this console log line here. And you will also see that if you go to application, to your local storage, you got this count value here, which is not the latest counter value, but only the value by which it was changed. Something we will improve soon. But you see that this also works. So now that we got our first effect, let's improve it by making sure that we don't store the value by which the counter changed in local storage, but instead the latest counter value that's stored in our NGRX store. And that's of course a pretty common requirement, that you want to get access to data stored in the store instead of just the value that's attached to an action. And you can easily get hold of the latest value stored in the store by using the special with latest from operator offered by RxJS. So this must be imported from RxJS, and with latest from then allows you to pass some value to this operator, which is then available in the next operator thereafter. For that here, in this effects class, we can inject our store, so our NGRX store, by importing store from NGRX store, and by using that as a type assignment here for this store property. And then here in with latest from, we can use this store select and select our counter, for example. And here we then might want to add some type annotations to get better TypeScript support by defining the shape of our global store here, where we have this counter key that stores the counter store as a number. And of course, we could also use our selectors here. Our select count selector, for example, which is imported from counter selectors from that file. With this operator added here, in the next operator thereafter, we get a different kind of value as an input. Instead of just getting the action here, we're now actually getting an array of different pieces of data. To be precise, an array with 2 elements. And therefore, we can also use array destructuring here to pull these 2 elements out of the array. The first element will be our action, just as before. But the second element will be that data which we kind of merged into this array. So here our counter, in this case, a number, as you can also see here. And therefore, of course, now here we can still log our action, but we can now also store our counter in local storage. We just need to convert it to a string though. And that's how easy it is to get hold of a value stored in our NGRX store, and how we can then use this value in our effect pipeline here. And with this change in place, if we save everything and serve this, you will see that if I now go to application and I clear this count value here, now you see that as I change the counter, this value is also reflected here on the right. So now we're not just storing the value by which the counter gets changed, but instead the latest counter value.